Hi, everybody. Welcome. I am so delighted to have the opportunity to spend the next hour discussing WriteShop. What a terrific program. I have to tell you that it is my very great pleasure to welcome my new colleague, Misty Lacey. Misty and I have only met through the computer. So
I know.
We're gonna change that at conference season this year. But Misty joins me today from Scottsbluff, Nebraska. And she says, no, it's not flat. That usually is the question everybody thinks. Those are the rolling hills of Nebraska, aren't they? It's a beautiful area, but maybe cold this time of year. And she grew up on a wheat farm and a cattle ranch. And after completing college, she and her husband lived and worked all over the world. Misty has taught in private, public, and international schools. She's also homeschooled her two children who are now in their 20s. And, you know, during her homeschooling years, she ran a number of homeschool organizations. She founded a hybrid organization in Arizona and taught WriteShop. So she comes to the table with a wealth of knowledge. She is what we call our company subject matter expert. And here today, she's going to talk to you about WriteShop. By way of housekeeping, my name is Gretchen Rowe. I am the homeschooling mother of 6, and I am the community relations coordinator here at Demme Learning. And it is my great pleasure to spend this time with Misty this afternoon. Misty, welcome.
Thank you. All that stuff just means we're getting old, Gretchen.
Well, I was thinking about this earlier today. I don't know how long ago you homeschooled, but I homeschooled long enough ago that we had to tell the public, if we were out as a group, that we had group doctor's appointments, not that we were homeschooling. And today I went to the hospital for a medical procedure, and it came up in 3 different conversations that I work for a company that sells homeschool materials. And you cannot believe how many questions got fired at me, because the world is changing. It really is.
That's right.
So,
times are changing.
When we talked about setting up this conversation, you had a terrific idea of talking about stumbling blocks to writing. And I think that's where we're going to begin. And I'm going to let you go through that. And then there are some questions I have to ask along the way. We had over 100 registrants, lots of questions. So I'm going to seed those in as I feel that they're appropriate. But how about I get you started with that first stumbling block?
Yeah, well, let me just tell everybody that I've been in the trenches. So, you know, as Gretchen said, we're not just sitting up here with pie in the sky in our ideal worlds. I've homeschooled, I've worked and homeschooled at the same time. I've been short on money and homeschooled. I've had family issues and homeschooled. So I think we both understand the commitment that it takes and some of the stumbling blocks of just homeschooling in general. But today I'm going to talk just about the stumbling blocks that people run across when they try to teach writing. I've answered the phone for WriteShop for 4 years after I left my hybrid school. And so I've heard from thousands of people, their questions and their heartache in trying to get their kids through school and especially through writing. So here we go. And I'm sure you'll all relate to this one. The stumbling block that is number 1 is the blank sheet of paper. Kids hate staring at a blank sheet of paper. So I'm in graduate school, and I recently read a research report that said most curriculum only spends 3 minutes on pre-writing and warming up exercises. So a teacher in a public school or in any school with normal curriculum would say, write a story about a cat and dazzle me. And the kids are just like, what? I have no idea what that means. I don't know how. The how is really not taught. They say what, but they don't say how, generally speaking. And the reason I started teaching WriteShop back in the day, you know, when the dinosaurs were roaming the earth, I loved it because it set the kids up for success, and it uses checklists, and that really makes everybody know what they're doing. And so it has a lot of pre-writing activities and exercises for all grades, from the primary all the way up to WriteShop 1 and 2. And that really, really helps kids know what to write about, but also how to write about that certain thing. It's not just going to say, write a story about a cat and dazzle me. It's going to say, hey, we're going to do a descriptive paragraph, and here is how you write a descriptive paragraph. You start with the topic sentence, you do details, you do this. And so it gives them a step-by-step guide on how to do that writing. And I think that is the first stumbling block. WriteShop uses a lot of graphic organizers, all different kinds for all different lessons, so the kids get used to doing that. And it really helps them be comfortable by the time they sit down to try to write their own assignments. WriteShop Primary and Junior, for those of you who don't know, and I think it's one of the questions that came up in the registering, is how is WriteShop set up? WriteShop Primary and Junior are set up so that the lessons take 3 weeks. You can do it in 2, but they're set up to do 3. The first week is all pre-writing. Let's say you meet 3 times a week for writing. You're going to do all pre-writing exercises. It's all fun and games, and it's all verbal. And then the next week, you're going to do the writing exercise. And the week after that, you're going to do the jazz hands celebrating, because we always want kids to be proud of what they've done and their accomplishments. And that also takes away one of the stumbling blocks, is like, why am I doing this if nobody's going to read it? Well, somebody's going to read it, and you're going to post it up. You're going to make a YouTube video. You're going to, go fly a kite or something fun after it's all said and done. So that's one stumbling block. Shall we go on?
Actually, I have a couple of observational questions
Okay.
that I think would be important for parents to know. I have often seen homeschool surveys that say that beyond the fear of public speaking and
Yep.
teaching their children math, homeschool parents do not want to teach their children to write creatively. So I wonder, before we go on to the next stumbling block, if you could talk about how WriteShop makes it so easy for parents to fit themselves in the frame, even if they are not comfortable with that process.
Right. That actually is the next stumbling block, because it's the you hate me stumbling block, or the I have no idea what I'm doing and I cannot do this. And that is a huge stumbling block. So
Terrific.
like I
Let's
said,
go there.
I've lived in the real world. I'm going to answer. These are both intertwined,
Sure.
I've lived in the real world, so I'll tattle on myself. I was an English teacher. People were hiring me. I ran a tutoring company. People were hiring me to tutor their children through writing, homeschooled kids or kids in public school who needed extra help. So that was what my tutoring company focused on. So as I was homeschooling my daughter, she started writing, I gave her a prompt, she wrote it. I sat down with the proofreading marks, started going through it with her. And I mean, I'm sure we've all been there, but the crumple the paper, run up the stairs, slam the door, crying, you hate me, you're just being picky. I was like, I'm getting paid to do this for other people and you get me for free. But she didn't care about that. It was a huge wake-up call to me that I needed checklists to be objective. And I think that is what you were talking about, is the fear of teaching writing, because if a parent is good at writing, they don't understand why their child struggles. That same scenario comes up with math as well. But if a parent is not good at writing, then they think, how can I ever teach something that I don't know anything about? It'd be like me trying to teach biology. So the checklists really answer that hesitation, because the checklists give everyone the objective of, here's where we're headed. This is the target. You want to get an A? Here is how you do it. I particularly liked using WriteShop in my hybrid school because the parents had the checklist. So I would teach in the class, the kids would go home, but the parents knew how those kids were going to get graded from that very first day. And I think that is a huge benefit to the WriteShop program, in that It keeps everyone objective. It helps the parents. It literally walks parents through. WriteShop Primary and Junior are scripted, so parents don't have to know what to say. They just have to read the book. And the WriteShop 1 and 2 Teacher's Guide even has a section on how do I say something nice if my kid's paper is a mess? How do I edit? There's a whole section on how to edit or how to revise and how to do it gently and focus on progress rather than perfection. So the checklists are a life changer. They were a life changer at my house. And I think that that is the way that parents who are fearful, who are either too perfectionistic because writing's easy for them and they don't understand why their kids struggle, or why if they hate writing, they're a mathy person and they hate writing, they can just, this is very concrete with the WriteShop program. The primary doesn't have checklists, but it does have scripted teacher's guides and it does have evaluation sheets, but you just follow the teacher's guide step by step by step by step, and that will get you through, even if you really don't know what you're doing.
Before we move on, can you talk a little bit about the difference between small steps and flying higher? Because I think this is probably one of the most unique and beneficial pieces of the program as far as parents understanding that they can tailor the program to their child.
Yes, so WriteShop is not grade specific, which is part of the reason it fits in so well with the Demme Learning philosophy. There's a slush fund there. So there's placement tests online. Go in, take the placement test. They're 99% of the time that placement test is right on the money. So take the placement test. But if you get into, let's say, book D with your 9-year-old, and maybe grandma's coming for a visit, maybe you've had a really, it's just not a good week, maybe, things happen in the real life. Within each lesson of the junior and the primary level, there are ideas called flying higher or smaller steps. The smaller steps takes that exact same lesson and says, hey, if your kid is struggling for whatever reason, maybe your kid has learning special needs, maybe it's just a bad week, maybe you've got, a baseball tournament to go to, do the smaller steps. But on the other hand, if your child needs a little challenge, has been particularly loving writing, really, and you want to kind of bump it up a little bit, then follow the flying higher ideas. Within each lesson of the primary and the junior, you can choose to bump it down a little bit, or you can choose to bump that same lesson up a little bit. So there's a little slush fund there on either end. And again, these ideas are already in the teacher's guide, so parents don't have to try to think about it themselves. They're like, oh yeah, I'll do that. Also in the teacher's guides are ideas for computer capers. So if you want your child to be involved in technology and have some fun extra things to do that involve the computer, you can follow that. There are also ideas within most of the lessons on how to write across the curriculum. You want to add a little math into your writing, or you want to add science or history into your writing. Those things are given for you already in the teacher's guides.
I think that's really exciting because you have given parents a roadmap.
That's it.
But you have left them with the creativity to bring their own encouragement and style into the experience. And I think that's one of the things that makes WriteShop very unique in its delivery. Can we go back to talking about the no motivation stumbling block? Because I think that's a big one.
Yeah, how many times have you, I can't count the number of times, or if you've heard the number of times parents have come up to a booth at convention or called on the phone and said, I cannot get my kids to write for anything. They hate it. And, you've got to pick your battles. And I've chosen this not to be one of mine. So we haven't done writing in my homeschool. I've heard it hundreds of times. But yet we know that kids need to learn how to write, especially, just anytime, even if they're going to trade school, if they're going to have a job, if they're owning a business, if they're an entrepreneur, if they're working for somebody, if they're going to college, they're going to need to learn. They're going to have to write. They're going to have to write emails. They're going to have to write memos, notes, cards, sermons. I don't know, whatever they have to write. There's a lot of writing in the world. So they do need to learn how to put their thoughts down on a piece of paper. And it is intimidating. But I think WriteShop answers the writing is boring, I can't get my kids to do it, and I can't fight this battle, by allowing students to write to their interests. So throughout all the levels, the primary, the junior, and the WriteShop 1 and 2 levels, WriteShop gives a big umbrella of a genre. So the lesson might say, we're writing a descriptive paragraph, or we're writing an adventure story, or we're writing a mystery, or we're writing a biography. But it doesn't say you have to research honeybees and write a 5-paragraph essay over a honeybee, because maybe the kids don't want to write about a honeybee. Maybe they want to write about a horse, or maybe they want to write about a zebra, or maybe they want to write about a famous basketball player. So that has been the glory for me in teaching WriteShop, is that I have been able to allow my students to pick topics that are of interest to them while still learning the basics of sentence structure, paragraph structure, narrative structure, essay structure, and all of those kind of things. I have had students write the entire year about horses. This particular student in my class one year loved her horse. She rode her horse every day. So she described her saddle for one assignment. She wrote a narrative about an emotional event, about a time she was at a rodeo. She described a process when she described how to, curry down her horse and take care of it. And she did a biography about a famous jockey. So every single assignment she applied to something with horse riding. She loved life. She was so happy to do that. I've had kids write about Lord of the Rings. You can also include literature into the WriteShop program. And if you're reading a certain series or a certain book, it's super easy to flip that right into a WriteShop lesson. I've had kids write about Harry Potter and all the different things there, or about certain pop culture artists for nearly the entire year. So it really is, they are able to do the writing that they want to do while still learning the background lesson behind the structure and the style of writing. So I think that really helps to motivate kids. The other thing that is motivating is the celebration at the end of each WriteShop primary and junior lesson. There is a celebration. So we always want to, like I said earlier, focus on progress, and WriteShop does that in the primary and the junior levels by allowing students to have a day to celebrate. They might go out and staple their story to the tail of a kite and go fly kites. Or they might put their story inside of a bottle and send a message to somebody in their family, or create a treasure map. Or in the primary B book, they create a rocket ship out of an oatmeal can, and they stick their story inside of it, and they take their rocket ship oatmeal can and they fly to an alien planet. Whatever their story was, they acted out using that rocket ship. So, I mean, what's not to love about that, right? It's not just sit down, write a story, that's it. You're writing it to me, I'm going to grade it, and we all hate life. It's, hey, get this done, and then we're going to go do this. Or you're going to make a file folder game, and we're all going to play a game. Let's see who wins. Or there's always some kind of fun activity that keeps WriteShop motivating. For the WriteShop 1 and 2, they don't have the games or the fun stuff at the end because it is for older kids, but they do have enough variety in the writing that I think it keeps kids interested and it helps them to be a little motivated. The lessons are short in the when you start WriteShop 1, you'll notice that the lessons are very short. There's only, you write 1 paragraph, 5 sentences, 5 to 7 sentences. And part of the reason for that is so that the kids can bite it off little at a time instead of having these huge, overwhelming assignments. We want them to focus on the details and get those down, and then we add the length later. So I think that's motivating too, because what kid can't sit down and write 5 to 7 sentences? It's, you know, it's really like, okay, I got this, I can do this. And then we celebrate it. And then we do it again. And then we celebrate it. And pretty soon they're like writing 3 to 5 paragraph essays and they didn't even realize that they've grown that much in their writing.
Can you, I wonder, before we go on, can you speak to how WriteShop offers supports? We had several parents say, how do I teach my child to write when writing is an impediment? And I know that you all make suggestions in the program. WriteShop makes, I guess I should say we now, since WriteShop is part of Demme Learning, but suggestions are made on how a parent can help facilitate the child who is reluctant to hold one of these. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that is another, it's another consideration when teaching writing. But think about it. I always tell parents this, Gretchen, it's think about how many processes it takes to write something, anything. You have to deal with the mechanics of holding an instrument of some sort, making sure it works. Is it sharp? Is it, you know, I pushed too hard, I broke my pencil, the ink is out, whatever the case is. And then you have to write it on lines, on paper, in the exact way, left to right, forming the letters. And then you have to know, like, okay, you have margins and you have to skip a line and you have to spell things correctly and you have to think about how you want to say something, but then maybe I want to say it in a way that I don't know how to spell it. And then you have to rethink that in your brain. And at the same time, we're always asking kids to make sure that the things flow that they're writing. So there has to be a beginning, a middle, and an end, or a topic sentence, details, and closing sentences. I mean, the list is forever long of all of these. They're doing critical thinking and they're worrying about punctuation and grammar and sentence structure, and do I have too many be verbs, and should I make an action verb, and how do I add in an ly, and all of these things. It's a lot, so no wonder. And then if you add on top of that the actual physical, like you said, the handicap or the struggle of just physically using your motor skills to do those movements, and some kids just aren't ready for that. They struggle, whether they have dysgraphia or dyslexia or whatever the case is, there's a struggle there. Or they could just be like my son, who as soon as he found the computer said, why would I ever have to type anything ever or write anything ever again in my entire life? And honestly, he never does. So there's a lot going on at one time. The simple answer to all of that is, I have to get a drink. Sorry. The simple answer to all of that is we encourage parents to scribe for their kids. To scribe means that the child may be sitting in the living room, twirling circles upside down with his feet in the air and telling a story. Or it may be that a teenager is outside shooting baskets while he's saying, you know, I'm going to talk about this and that. And he's shooting baskets while he's thinking, while he's brainstorming, while he's writing sentences. That's okay. My husband to this day, and I do the same thing. And studies have shown that when you're stuck on something, go do something physical. And that will help. So if I'm doing a project for my work and I have to stop and think about something, I'll go out and I'll walk the dogs around the yard, or I'll garden a little bit, or I'll do the dishes, or do something to get my body moving so I can stop and think. And we want the same thing. We want to teach the kids that it's okay to do that. Don't duct tape them to a chair and say, you can't get up until this is done, because maybe they need to go, turn some circles in the living room before they can think about something and come back to it after that. So scribing is good for teaching students the writing process and taking away that handicap or that struggle. One thing, you get to take away that one thing. They still have to critically think, they still have to form sentences, but at least you're taking away the physical aspect of handwriting. So
I think that makes a tremendous amount of difference. I know when I speak at homeschool conferences and I talk to parents about creative writing, as a former creative writing instructor, your phone is one of your most powerful tools. If nothing else, if you don't want to sit and physically write your students' essay, they can get a wonderful draft simply through using the email tool and the voice to text on your phone. And that's a great place for a lot of parents to begin. What I love about the prompts in WriteShop is they guide you to the questions to ask of your students so that they can stay in the creative mode. And, we ask so much of students when we ask them to put a pencil on the paper, and my student might want to tell me a story about an elephant. Elephant, how do I spell elephant? The story ends up to be about a pig because I can spell pig, but I don't think I can spell elephant. So being able to keep them in that creative content production is so critical in that process. And I'm excited to see that WriteShop allows us to do that with parents.
That's it. So there's one other thing about this whole writing thing. Don't think, and I want people to know, like they always say, oh, okay, so they're going to sit down and type up whatever they're saying on the computer. That's fine. And for an older child, that works because then the kid can go back and edit while it's still on the computer, and that's totally fine. But there are a lot of ways to get ideas out on a piece of paper. If you don't want to do the physical handwriting, you can do it on the computer in kind of bigger font and then print it off. You could tape wrapping paper to the back of a door at your house, use painter's tape and tape that to the back of the door and use a big marker to write that way as your kids are dictating. And then if you have younger kids and you really do want them to practice their handwriting, which I totally get, you can have them trace over, use like a Sharpie or something like that, and then have them trace over with a highlighter or some other color so that they're forming the letters, but they're not having to do that at the same time that they're trying to be creative. Let's separate those two issues. So there's the let's be creative and do some critical thinking part. And then there's the, okay, but now let's go back and work on the physical aspect of handwriting. So there's those two issues can be divided and you can still accomplish a great piece of writing. For how long should you let your kid dictate? That is a big question, and a lot of question.
You read my mind.
A lot of parents have when they are homeschooling teenagers. The answer isn't as easy because you kind of have to know your kid. I have taught 9th and 10th graders who struggled physically with the aspect of handwriting, and they did very well if they could dictate, or they would use the text to type apps. Like I think Word has that now. There's some other applications where you can do that. There's some struggles with that because you have to put in periods and things like that, but they get the basic idea down and then they can go back and edit it. I wouldn't encourage parents to do it if they feel like their student is just being lazy. If the kid is able to type, let's say, I would highly encourage typing programs to get those kids out and able to out from under the whole you dictate, or I'll dictate and you scribe for me scenario. Get them onto a keyboard and get them typing their own stories. So that's what I think works, is let them dictate until they can type. on their own. And then once they're up and running with the typing, you can't teach it fast enough. Once they're up and running with the typing, they can go from there. It's always a good idea to have the kids print their rough drafts. In WriteShop, we call them sloppy copies. I'm talking about older elementary to high school, junior high and high school kids. Print their rough drafts off and edit those in on a paper with like different colors and using proofreading marks. That's always a good idea. But for the littles, if they dictate to you, especially if they're emergent writers, pre-writers, things like that, just write it, let them trace some words and call it a day.
I think one of the valuable experiences of teaching your student to write compositionally is to see how that evolves. And sometimes when we're homeschool parents and we're in the daily grind, we don't see that process. So I would encourage parents, as you begin the writing process each year, to have a folder and keep those final copies. When you have a celebration at the end of a level and you have the opportunity to go back and look at, here's where we began and here's where we are now, that's a huge change. And we fail to see that when we're in the daily grind of, okay, you didn't start the sentence with a capital letter again, and those kinds of things. So that will be an encouragement for both you and your student. And I think that makes a tremendous difference. We talked about the physical struggle of handwriting. Is there anything else that you would think was important for parents who are weighing WriteShop as an option to know as far as the physicality of the expectations of the program?
The primary level is really a verbal program. Almost all of it is verbal. So don't worry if your kids, if they are pre-readers, they could do level A, no problem. If they're emergent readers, they can do A or B. Everything can be read. It's not worksheet driven in the primary level. The value is in the teacher's guide and the materials that are in the teacher's guide. It's not like you're going to sit down every day and hand your kid a worksheet. That's just not the way WriteShop is written. You're going to have one worksheet. The kid will do it for 5 minutes. They might practice some letters. They'll answer some questions. You can write for them if you need to. And the next day you're going to read a picture book. You're going to have a verbal conversation. Like, what day is today? Tuesday. Okay, what are we doing today? We're going to make brownies. We're going to send them to grandma. Okay, let's write that down. And it's all verbal. And then they're going to play a game. They might be running around the house and labeling all the nouns or describing different little objects that you have that they find around the house. And that's all done verbally. And then at the end of all that, they do their writing assignment. And again, for those younger students who might be struggling with handwriting, they can do that verbally. In the junior program, it does add in, that's like, let's say 9 to 12-year-olds is generally a good range for the WriteShop junior program. It does add in grammar. It's not considered a full grammar program, but there is grammar components to it. And that grammar is then asked for in the writing lessons. So it's not a standalone grammar like, okay, today you're going to learn about prepositions. It's more like, today you're going to learn about adverbs, and then you're going to add adverbs to your writing assignment. So it's useful in that way. And the junior program also teaches writing to a prompt in case your kids need to and learn how to do like essay questions and things like that. But again, in that program, we always celebrate progress rather than perfection. They will still get up and be moving around, and it can be done completely verbal if kids are struggling with the handwriting aspect. And then in the WriteShop 1 and 2, I'm going to go backwards. In the junior program, they start learning how to self-edit. So there's self-editing checklists, and we want the kids to realize that even the best authors have editors, and it's okay to have an editor, and we make a game out of it. Let's see if you can find, you know, some of these things that we can change, or go put your editing hat on, or get your little editing buddy, your stuffed animal that's your editing buddy, you know, and sit it next to you so that you can do this editing today, and finding some things that you can change. And so it's a very gentle approach to correcting or revising a student's writing, and teaching them how to make it better, but not like, don't get out the red pen and start marking all over it or anything like that. And then in the WriteShop 1 and 2 programs, there are checklists for the student. So the student, it's written to the student. The WriteShop 1 and 2 program, they are written to the students. And so the student has gone through the lessons, and then they've learned the writing process. So they've brainstormed and they've written their sloppy copy, their rough draft, and now it's time for them to edit. They can use what we call the student writing skills checklist to edit their own writing. We want them to grow their editing eye, and it takes a while. I'll never forget a kid I had one time who said, "Mrs. Lacey, this is it. I did all my editing." And I went and looked at the paper, and there's like 25 verbs in 5 sentences. So I had to go back and say, "Did you see, but what about this? Did you see that?" He's like, "I just can't see those." Like, you just have to grow that editing eye. It's not something that comes naturally. But the WriteShop program helps with that by having these checklists and explaining what each item means. There's never anything on a checklist that hasn't been in a lesson, that hasn't been explained. So the checklists are not generic. They go with each lesson, and they're incremental. So they grow as the kids go through the program. So I think that's helpful. And then there's also a teacher writing skills checklist. So once the kids have "this is the best as it can be, Mom" copy, or I used to call it "this is the best as it can be, Mrs. Lacey" copy, then the teacher can go through and use the teaching writing skills checklist and know exactly what to look for. There's no surprises. It's not like you have to know everything. All you have to do is follow the checklist. Did your child have an adjective? Did they have a topic sentence? Is there a title? Is there emotion words? And if not, you just mark needs to be included. There's a check mark for that. And if they did, then it's great. And then the kids all know. They go back and they finish their final draft, and there's an evaluation chart. So you don't even have to wonder how to grade. So
That's awesome.
That's really
that has to be encouraging to a parent who might have a difficult time finding themselves in the frame of, what do I need to ask? So we've got a question today that says, "I have a 4th and a 6th grader, and we have done grammar and some writing, but I want to give them some tricks for making writing easier. Do I start in E and F? Are D and F similar?" So that actually gives me a wonderful foundation to say to you, can you talk a little bit about I put the placement tool up in the chat, but let's talk about, how do I decide where to put my child in the program?
Yeah, the placement tool is great. I always encourage parents to start with their older child, because it's usually, you can kind of sometimes have the younger ones tag along, but the older one, you really have to make sure they get shored up in the writing depending on their age. So it's always, and you don't want that child to be bored, where you can always make something easier. But if something is too easy, then the older child might be like, "What, really, Dad, you think I'm dumb? Like, you're putting me in this? This is a baby curriculum." And remember, 90% of writing is motivation and confidence. And so if you put a child in a curriculum that is too baby-ish, looks too junior for their age, even if their ability is there, you're going to defeat your own purposes. So start with the older child, and then see if maybe the younger child, and like the parent that you mentioned has a 4th and a 6th grader. I might aim for level E without knowing any further information about that family. And if you want to call, I know the customer service rep people are super, super good about helping you decide where to put your kids. But without knowing anything else, I might suggest E, because that way the younger child can maybe do the smaller steps and the older child can maybe do the challenge, or just stick with E right in the middle. E starts to teach 5-paragraph essays, so it's always a good place to start. And also, then you can move on to F next year, and then WriteShop 1 and 2, and it seems to be a good pattern. But when you're teaching a number of kids together, it's important to, you can try to group them, but don't group them. You know, if you have a 5-year-old and an 11-year-old, you're probably not going to be able to group them because their ability is so far apart. In a case where I have a parent that would ask, I have an 11-year-old and a 5-year-old, what do I do? I would suggest focusing on the 11-year-old and letting the 5-year-old tag along. And by that, I don't mean like being annoying or going out and playing tag, but like just have the 5-year-old dictate a story, tell the same kind of a story. If the 11-year-old is doing a mystery and they're going to fly to the moon and there's some kind of mysterious thing that happens and they have to figure out, you know, who did it. Let the 5-year-old draw a picture about that, build an alien planet with blocks or Legos or some, you know, some kind of toys, use action figures to act out that story. You can still go into the storytelling mode and do kind of beginning, middle, and end with the 5-year-old without actually doing a set curriculum. I mean, if you want to buy level A, then by all means, we will sell you level A, but you can just let the youngers tag along. And sometimes it's better to start with the older child and get going on that and then add that level in. So it's better to not be overwhelmed. Especially don't try to do 3 new WriteShop curriculums in 1 year. That's a killer. 2 is okay if you're a veteran homeschooler and have been doing it for a while and you need to do that, then that's okay. But 3 is really, really hard to do. But it's okay to group kids too. So if you have a 5 and a 7-year-old, maybe shoot for book B and teach them together. And one might do a little bit better than the other. One might be able to handwrite and the other one can do verbal. And you can always go back and repeat, because WriteShop gives that big umbrella of a genre like I was talking about, and it doesn't do specific lessons. It's okay to repeat WriteShop levels because the kids can write about entirely different things the second time around. One time they might write about their favorite stuffed unicorn, you know, and the next time they might write about a visit to the zoo for the same exact lesson. So because there's such a big variety that can take place, you can, you know, kind of get double bang for your buck if you need to teach a number of kids, like have the younger one tag and then go back and repeat that when he's old enough. So that's kind of a good way to do that.
I think one of the things that Misty has said that I want to make sure that we emphasize, because we talk about this in all of our disciplines here at Demme Learning, it's always easier to begin with the oldest child.
Yes.
As far as placement is concerned. And what we want parents to bear in mind is that you have the least amount of time left with that child. Yes. And I know in a household, I mean, I had 6. There were times when it was bedlam. And it's easy to feel like you need to give attention to where the most noise is coming from. And that's usually a younger child. But I think it's always great for parents to look at whatever they're doing academically and recognize that the value of investment of time is best served with the eldest child and then working backwards from there. Yep. Because it's amazing how much is caught, not necessarily taught.
Yeah, exactly. So if you have kids too that are in that WriteShop 1 and 2 level and maybe then youngers, so if you have junior high, high school kids and then maybe younger, you know, kind of 2 separate groups, you can just remember that WriteShop 1 and 2, they are written, those books are written to the student. So if your child is on level and doesn't have any unusual or like time-consuming struggles, remember that you can just give them the book and let them go. They can do their skill builders, the grammar portion, they can read the lesson, they can do their brainstorming. And in that case, then you would have time to maybe do a junior level program with a 9 and 11-year-old, or do a primary program with a 7 or an 8-year-old, something like that.
That brings to mind another question. A couple of parents asked this: can you step into WriteShop at any level, or do you have to begin at the beginning? In other words, the questions that were posed by parents that are on my second screen here that I'm keep looking over to are things like, can I begin WriteShop if I have a 13-year-old? And I know the answer is yes, but can you speak to that? Because we're looking to build a skill set. So.
Right. Yes, you can. WriteShop is made to flow from level A all the way up to WriteShop 2. But by all means, that each level is also independent. So that's where that placement test comes in and is handy, because you don't want to put a third grader, let's say, in level A, just because that's the beginning of the primary levels, when that third grader should probably be in C. So put the child, right, a 13-year-old, I would absolutely put in WriteShop 1 and not worry about doing any of the primary or junior levels. Everything that is needed to be taught is reintroduced or taught in that level. So kids that have had no formal writing curriculum, haven't been in a class, haven't done actual, like writing assignments that have rubrics or checklists or any requirements like that, they can jump still right into, let's say, WriteShop 1. There's one exception to that, and that is, and I don't know if we have any parents that have this old of kids, if you have a 17, 18-year-old who has never done writing, and you're trying to get that child like out the door to college, you have two options in that case. You can rush through, and in my world, this is what I would have done. I would start with WriteShop 1, which are very simple, short assignments, and I would make sure that my kid got through that in a semester or less. And then I would move into WriteShop 2, which covers 5-paragraph essays, thesis statements, and I would add some formatting into that, MLA or APA formatting, wherever you live, whatever the college is going to use if that kid is going to. And I would do that through like a junior or a senior. There are times when parents have chosen to drop their junior or senior into WriteShop 2 without doing one, because maybe the child has gone to a class, they've already done some kind of writing. And so then it would kind of be, there's no use to be redundant over, they already do good topic sentences. They already know how to write those well. They know how to do closing sentences. They know how to write a process, or how to write an active voice. So in that case, then just jump them right into WriteShop 2. That's kind of a rare exception.
Great. And that's good to know, because we did have some parents who were looking for high schooler information, and it depends a little bit on what your students' experiences are. In anything that Misty or I have said today that has brooked a question for you, if you're watching this recording, we would encourage you to reach out to us. Our contact information will be in the follow-up email. And you don't have to row this boat by yourself. We are here to help you feel confident in the decision that you make in the process. Those of you who are joining us live, Cheryl's asked us a great question. I'm glad I got the chance to answer it. But if any other questions, please let us know. We have about 10 minutes left here. And we're going to be sharing some blog posts with you all in the follow-up. I think you'll find them beneficial. But by all means, the experience of WriteShop is probably beyond anything that you have experienced thus far. The encouragement that you as a parent, regardless of how you feel about writing, can accomplish this is huge. So Misty, I wonder if you would spend a couple minutes and tell us, in your experience with WriteShop, what are some of the successes that you have seen?
I think that the most gratifying are kids that have come into my own classes who really struggled, whose parents were crying, who, like, the kids didn't, the parents didn't think the kid would ever be able to go to college because they weren't writing or being able to write complete sentences, the grammar, the structure, the punctuation, the spelling, and all of that were just so far behind their age level. And to see the growth of those kids through a year or two, depending on the class of WriteShop, really, I think is a blessing. I've had kids go through my program that are professional writers now, and that's really gratifying. From a customer service standpoint, and all the people that I've helped over the years, I think that when moms call, and generally they're moms, but when they call and they're desperate, when they're desperate for help, they have a number of kids, they just can't quite get themselves figured out on how they're going to do this, and we can sit down and walk them through a program, walk them through the schedule, show them that it can be easy, and it might seem intimidating, but just keep it simple and flexible. And if I can walk them through that and show them how that can fit into their life and how their kids can grow, that's super gratifying for me. It's also gratifying when I've had kids that have struggled and the parents just never thought of scribing. They've just struggled and the kids, and then all of a sudden the mom calls back and says, look, this is, my child created this. And it's pretty amazing to see, the growth there. So I've had grandparents teach this program to their children, or to their grandchildren. That's fun to see the grandparents, get down on the floor and create things and help the child do a
So let's
research
talk
project.
about, you said that WriteShop has one lesson that goes over a span of time. Can we delve into that a little bit more in depth and have you explain what are the expectations? Am I teaching writing 5 days a week? Or can you just sort of give parents a thumbnail outline of what to expect in a given week or a given lesson?
In the primary and junior programs, they're almost the same. The junior adds in a little bit of extra stuff, but overall, the first week you'll do writing 3 days a week, and you can pick your days. In the schedule in the teacher's guide, it's like Monday, Wednesday, and Friday or whatever, but of course, pick your weeks. I never homeschooled on Friday. I needed a let's keep it together day, so we tried not to homeschool on Friday, and we caught up that day with everything that we didn't get done. We went to the park and that sort of thing. So I probably in my own homeschooling would have done writing like Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, or maybe Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday, something like that. So the first week is 3 different activities that the kids will do and you'll do with them. Some of them are more time consuming than others. In the junior level, the first day of every lesson it includes the grammar sheets, and those can be done pretty much by the kids without help from the parents. So if you're working or a busy parent, you can just give your kids those sheets and they can do that, and that's it. The activity set 2, which is the second day of the primary and junior program, that's the fun day. That's the game day, the activity day. That's where the kids are going to run around and do something, play a memory game, matching cards. Like I said, label things, nouns in around the house, things like that. So that day you probably have to be involved. In the primary levels, that's also the day you read a storybook to the kids. But again, make it work for you. If you're busy on that second day, read the story at night, as a bedtime story. There's always ways to kind of flex around that. So that might take a little bit of time. And then there's the actual lesson in the junior level where they're might be teaching writing with emotion, or It could be using your senses. That's part of the lesson, and the kids can do that more or less on their own. Then the next week is all about their writing assignment. So that's when they're doing their sloppy copy or their rough draft. Of course, the parents have to be involved if they're scribing for the child. But if the child is writing on his or her own, then the parents don't have to be that involved in that process. The junior program introduces self-editing checklists. So that's something that parents then can look at that self-editing checklist and kind of very gently mark 2 or 3 things. I generally say praise 3 things and, correct 1 or something like that, but be very, very careful with the corrections. Your kids will get their eye growing and they'll start seeing things on their own. So you don't really have to kill their papers, correct every single thing. So that's it. And then the final week is all this, the finishing up, the celebration, the making the rocket ship or flying the kite. And those really depend, as far as parent involvement, that depends on how, it's kind of like the science fair. Or if you want to be involved and sit on the floor and build it together, by all means do that. But if you are busy and you're like, okay, here's all the things you need, and whatever the kid creates, that's perfect, then that's okay. So that really is flexible depending on the parent. And that's it. And like I said, the WriteShop 1 and 2 program, there is a time for model and teaching. If the students need a practice paragraph, the parent should be involved with that. And then also the editing and revising, but it gets less in parent involvement because we want students to become independent learners.
And I think that's a very important point. Every one of my children has reached the independence level at a different age.
Exactly right.
So I could never really have an expectation. Okay, by this age, I know you'll be able to do. And I know as parents, we have an ideal of what we want, but sometimes reality doesn't match that ideal.
Exactly right.
It's wonderful to be able to have a program that adapts for that. And parents who are familiar with Demme Learning, familiar with math UC, with spelling UC, with analytical grammar, WriteShop has been a wonderful addition to our cadre of products. If you're interested in knowing how you can fold WriteShop in with spelling UC or with analytical grammar, our placement consultants would be happy to explore that with you in some depth. One of the beauties of all of these programs is they are not grade level specific. They are skills-based programs. So being able to connect the dots for your student is a personal journey for you that we would be happy to come alongside and help with. Misty, do you have any closing thoughts as we conclude our time together today?
Yeah, I do. Here's my closing thoughts, because I know that homeschooling parents are in the trenches, and I can look back over my years of homeschooling, and like I said, my kids are in their mid-20s, they're on their own. And some people, when their kids are out of the house, have regrets, right? The empty nest syndrome. I've never had that because I poured my blood, sweat, and tears into my kids. But I can look back at that and say that some of those times are the best times. So enjoy the journey is my closing thoughts. If your kids are struggling, that's okay. Just enjoy the journey. Celebrate the small things and don't panic. I know as homeschooling parents, we put a lot on our plates and we worry about our kids, and that's why we're homeschooling them. We wouldn't be if we didn't worry about them. But the journey is unique, and you'll look back on it with fondness one day. So I guess that's my closing remarks is no matter where on the spectrum of writing, math, spelling, whatever, wherever you are, Demme happens to cover, I think, the hardest subjects, math and writing these days. So wherever you are in that, just enjoy the journey, have fun with your kids, be flexible, and focus on the relationships.
I've often said that the years passed very swiftly. Some of the days felt like they lasted forever.
Exactly right.
But truly, you will be amazed at how swiftly time does
Yeah.
go by. And I know when you are a homeschool mom and chaos is swirling around you, sometimes it feels like that may not be happening. Please know that the folks at Demme Learning, everyone who interacts with customers either was homeschooled themselves, homeschooled their children, or has worked in positions of homeschool advocacy for years and years. We do understand your journey, and we'd love to join with you in that journey. Thank you all for joining us today. Misty and I really appreciate your time. And we hope that you will go to our demmelearning.com/guild and find more of these roundtable discussions and things that might suit answers to questions that your family has as they continue the homeschool journey. Thanks everyone for joining us today. We really do appreciate you. Take care.